Gerber. I'm the director of Paracelsus Recovery, which is an addiction treatment and mental health treatment provider based in Zurich in Switzerland. And it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Paul Hokemeyer, who is a recognized expert in addressing clinical issues that arise at the intersection of wealth, power, celebrity, and behavioral health. Dr. Paul has practice in New York and a presence in Telluride, Colorado, and also in Malibu, California. And many of you know him already because he's first of all a sought-after speaker, and he's a television commentator on these specific topics. And also, Dr. Hokemeyer has presented at iCAAD here in the past years as well. He holds a doctorate in law, but at some point decided that practicing law is actually not for him. So he went on to study a master's degree and then his PhD in clinical psychology. I will let him tell you himself a bit more how this particular interest and switch of careers came about. And a few years ago, I myself attended a presentation of Dr. Paul. I believe it was actually at iCAAD. And because at Paracelsus Recovery we work with a particular clientele of ultra high net worth and celebrity clients, and Dr. Paul was presenting about specific challenges and issues that can arise when working therapeutically with that specific clientele. We very much recognize the relevance and the importance of Dr. Hokemeyer's work. Those of you who work or have worked with celebrity clients, and I'm sure many of you have, you know that they can be a particularly activating and challenging clientele to work with. And Dr. Hokemeyer is currently working on a book that is planned to be published in summer 2018, is that right? With Hazelden Publishing, in which he explores and defines celebrity and celebrity culture from what I would call, after having listened to the synopsis of your book, from a sociopsychological perspective. And I think this book will probably be a very helpful guide or manual for any clinician who works with this specific clientele. And today, Dr. Paul will present to you the current status of his thinking and his insights of this evolving work. So I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Lots of stuff to maneuver around here, and you will see that I don't stand very well, so I'll be walking around. My name is Dr. Paul Hokemeyer, and this is not me. Even with the best hair and makeup, this would never really be me. I am based in, my practice is based in New York City, and I have an office, as Jan said, in Malibu, California. And I want to just start giving a little autobiographical nature of the work and how I got to be an expert in this particular, with working with this niche population. I started my career as a lawyer, and actually I started my career, I think let's just go back further. I came out of the womb, that's going back real far. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and when I was a year old, my family moved my brother and me out to a suburb of Maryland. Over the years, that suburb became very affluent, and people were building these huge mega mansions with 5-car garages, and tennis courts, and swimming pools. And I remember riding my bicycle around these neighborhoods and saying, who are these people who live in these houses? And that question really informed the trajectory of my life and professional career. I majored in economics in college because I was profoundly influenced by the power of money and how money has this extraordinary power to do great things, but it also has a very destructive force in it. After graduating from college, I went to law school and I became a bankruptcy lawyer because, again, I was fascinated by the extraordinary power of wealth. I did that for a number of years, and I was in the right place at the right time, and I had the opportunity to leave the practice of law at a very young age. And I went to work in the not-for-profit world, and I was working for Greenpeace International, living in Amsterdam. And I was working for an organization that ostensibly was doing, and not ostensibly, that is doing extraordinarily important work on behalf of our environment. And my job was to raise principal gifts of $1 million and above, from ultra-high net worth people around the world. And the dialogue that was occurring within the organization, how these human beings were being talked about, I found quite distasteful. There was a sense of entitlement that these people were objectified, that there were strategies to go after these people, how we would capture them and extract money from these people. I was living in Amsterdam when September 11th happened, and I still get a little shocked up. As a white privileged male who grew up in America, the security of my world was guaranteed until it wasn't on that particular day. And I had an existential crisis, and I just desperately wanted to move back to America. And I moved back to America, and I started working with one of America's wealthiest, well-known families. And I was doing things for them like negotiating a lease on their jet, selling their house in Aspen, getting their 22-year-old daughter out of a crack house in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, this wasn't the first time that this daughter had been pulled out of a crack house. It was actually her fifth. And the family had spent up to, I think, over $500,000 US just throwing money at this problem, thinking that money would be the solution. And I observed that money was, in fact, part of the problem. That there were systemic forces in place here that were keeping this family trapped in this cycle of destruction. I decided, you'll see there's a theme here. I have an existential crisis and I go back to school. I'm running out of degrees. I'm hopefully not running out of existential crises. But in any event, I got a master's degree in clinical psychology focusing on family systems because I knew intuitively that there was something intense about the force that was going on systemically. I did that. I had to do, as part of the training, I had to sit. And you see that I don't sit very well. And I chose to do my internship in a free clinic in Hollywood. And I was working with the most marginalized, disposable people on the planet, HIV-positive, transgendered sex workers. And I was working over here in East LA with this particular population. And then I would get in my car, and I would drive over here to Beverly Hills, and I'd start working with this population. And I saw, isn't this extraordinary, that the externals of these people's lives are quite different, aren't they? Internally, though, well, there's some real similarities. I have a hyperactive central nervous system. I have an insecure attachment. I have a trauma background. Our profession of clinicians in behavioral health, we have done an extraordinary job of working with people who exist in societies on the margins in positions of what? Powerlessness. We're quite comfortable in that role, aren't we? Working with women, working with people of color, working with sexual minorities. Over here, with this population, with people who exist in the world as a celebrity in positions of power, we've actually done a horrible job, right? And so I thought, there's something to this. So I went back to school and I got a PhD because I really wanted to explore in depth what this experience is like. What's it like to be in the skin of a person of wealth or a celebrity? What's it like to exist in the world on three significant levels of existence? Intrapersonally, what's my self-concept? Interpersonally, how does it impact the significant relationships in my life? And my work is subsequently, the work that I'll be talking about here, focuses on the psychotherapeutic relationship because it means something. And we can't deny that it doesn't because money and power and success and celebrity are extraordinarily forceful and we need to be paying attention to them. And then socioculturally. So what is the milieu? What does the zeitgeist look like? And I did that work because my belief, right? My belief is that if we are practicing from a humanistic stance, that if we are compassionate human beings, we can't assign a quantitative value to that. We can't say if you make below 100,000 pounds, then you deserve competent care, culturally significant care. But if you don't, then now we can do these things that our society tends to do, and I'll talk about those, specifically objectifying, manipulating, turn human beings into objects. And so my work then it was published, and I've done a number of journal articles, and so this is the next extension of the particular work, because I'm looking at the notion of celebrity, because our society and our culture is obsessed about celebrity. So the first level of analysis is, what am I talking about here? What is celebrity? And the definition that I've come up with is that celebrity is a dynamic construct that evolves over time to represent the dominant mode of expression in the cultural zeitgeist. So we have to understand that celebrity is not a fixed thing. It evolves over time, and I think it's helpful to talk about how the evolution has occurred. So if we go back centuries, we look at who the first celebrities were. They were intimate beings that gave us direction in our lives, because when we first began, life was quite chaotic, wasn't it? And so we look to deities, we look to gods, we look to mythological figures. This is Ithaca trying to take flight. We looked to royalty, we looked for nobility, we looked for people and characters who would give us direction and calm the chaos that we experienced in the world. Things began to change quite significantly with the advent of the printing press, and began to write things down. And at this point, we began to take a look at the lives of great men. So we began to look for leadership. We began to look for direction in our lives by looking at other people who had lives of character. The second real significant change happened when photography was introduced. And now, for the very first time, we could have celebrity portraiture. And the image, as opposed to the character of the celebrity, became very important. What's important here is now, for the very first time, we started focusing on the physical attributes of celebrity. So we have an obsession with Barbra Streisand's nose. We have an obsession with Elizabeth Taylor's eyes, Angelina Jolie's lips, Victoria Beckham's legs, Sophia Loren's breasts. So we began to view human beings as objects and began to look at features of them. It also gave rise to the whole notion of paparazzi, where people were being objectified and actually sold. Their images were being sold, quantified, a form of slavery by virtue of who they are and what they look like. And we have images of this is an iconic image of Jacqueline Onassis looking stunning crossing Fifth Avenue. And then we have Judy Garland alighting from a coach here in London looking very anemic and like she's on the verge of death. And so we have the focus now being on celebrity images. And if we look from where we are socioculturally, we moved from the chaotic now to the cyclical. So we began to see that there's some order in the world and that there's a season. So there's beginnings, middles, and ends, right? And so things aren't fixed. And this was particularly relevant during the First and Second World War, so that we were escaping, actually, the realities of our world through fantasy. The advent of the television was extraordinarily important because now celebrities who were once seen as larger than life were now being brought into our living rooms, and we were living with them on a daily basis. We could actually see the details. We felt like we had an intimate connection to them. This began the process of what is known as democratization of celebrity, so that it once was a very narrow, small thing, it began to get wider and wider and wider. The next advent in terms of television is what I would call the vulgarization of celebrity. So that now you have people who are becoming celebrities just by virtue of their capacity to be mean and angry and emotionally deregulate. The internet then began to increase the democratization, and now we've moved from the chaotic to the cyclical to what's called the linear. So that we forgot, actually, that things happen in cycle, that things happen in season. And that basically that there's no going back, that there's just this upward forward. And we'd also remarked the beginning, the move, if you will, from the whole to the individual. That's simultaneous with this was this increase in the level of narcissism that was able to be expressed through basically the internet and through reality television. And we have these mediums to produce celebrities. We have YouTube, we have Instagram, and we have Facebook. And now a celebrity can be a person in their own community. They can be a celebrity by virtue of their postings on the Facebook. So we've had celebrity going from this very special, narrow place to this very wide place that's based on narcissism. And it's important to recognize, too, that these are not mutually exclusive, that these are additive. That we still think, in some level, we still think of celebrity as having this place of deity, that people of celebrity hold a very special place, that they are subhuman. So the next level of analysis is, who's the celebrity? And instead of me kind of dithering on about it, why don't we just take a look at some images and see who that is. Does anybody know who this is? He's the highest paid actor in India. 48 million US last year. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of people in India that watch a lot of movies. Does anybody know who that is? Right off the line. Grace Kelly. We know who that is, right? Come on. We know who that is. Come on. We know who that is. We know who that is, right? We know who that is. You know who that is? It's from Iran. She's the highest income earning actress in Iran. We know who that is. Bill Gates. He does look different. It's probably a younger. We know who that is. We know who that is. We know who that is, right? How about that? P2E. He's the highest earning. He's the most popular kid on YouTube. He's from Sweden. We know that. Kim Kardashian. Thank you for saying that, so I don't have to. You'll see that we went from the sublime to the ridiculous. But nevertheless, there you have it. And so if we think about this, if we think about these people, these human beings, have achieved celebrity. Well, that's not going to work. These people have achieved celebrity status for what? For features of their being. Not the wholeness of their being, but features of their being. And so the definition, my definition of who is a celebrity, is that human beings who have been reduced to an object by virtue of their feature. It's quite a wide range of individuals, isn't it? And so, what are some of these features that somebody, when we've just seen the images, I'm happy to click through them again. What are some of the features that a person can be a celebrity for? I cheated. Yeah. Just sort of call them out, top of mind. Boom, boom, boom. Voice.
Athletic ability.
Athletic ability. Sorry? Legs, absolutely. Physical attribute. Beauty. Right. Mind, thinking, intellect, exactly. Talent, wealth. Brilliant.
Family.
Sex. Somebody say sex? Or did I just hear sex? It's going to be Freudian here.
Power.
Success. Absolutely. Power. Brilliant. Right. So typically when we think of celebrities, we start with people who are talented. This is a young, brilliant Whitney Houston, who I think was one of the most extraordinary voices and creatures of the planet. Well, we've heard. Surname, right? Just because I have a certain surname, I can be a celebrity. If I'm a Rockefeller, if I'm a this, or if I'm a Gates, or if I'm a that, then I can be a celebrity in virtue of a community. And that, we need to remember that that's a relative construct, isn't it? Because if I live in a little village somewhere out in the hills of England, and my father is X, Y, or Z, and I carry that surname, then I'm going to have an identity of a celebrity in that particular community. So we need to remember that these are relative constructs, and we need to keep focusing on the fact that it's the feature of a human being that reduces them to an object. Somebody mentioned this too, and you named all of these, by the way. It's a very, very clever crowd. Intelligence, character, right? Both good and bad, actually. So we have the Mother Teresa, we have the Hitler, we have the Donald Trump. We have, we have all of that, and then appearance, right? I mean, typically, and this is why the work that I've done, starting with wealth and now looking, in the construct of celebrity, I draw very heavily on feminist theory, feminist thoughts, because the feminists are the leaders in this area in terms of thinking about the reduction of a human being to an object. And we'll talk about that more, because that's the essential takeaway of this lecture. And now you can be a celebrity by virtue of subscribers, simply by virtue of the number of followers that you have. This notion of just now being famous for being famous, which is what reality television was about, although in my research it's been suggested that not persuasively in my opinion, but that the first person who was famous for being famous was actually British. Does anyone want to venture a guess who that was? Oscar Wilde, an Irishman who did an enormous amount of, I think, extraordinary writing here in London. But he's been attributed as being the first person who's just simply famous for being famous. But in contrast to the Paris Hiltons or the Kim Kardashians, he provided something of value to our society. He kind of gave us insight into the human experience. And he he gave something of value. I will just stop there. And so from a social cultural standpoint, we know from the feminists that if you turn a human being into an object, it's the first step towards justifying violence against that person. So we, as a society and as a culture, as a family, as a clinician, need to diligently avoid objectifying patients in any capacity. And this isn't regard just to celebrity, but this could be regard to sexual identity, this could be to the color of their skin, right? Because this stuff is hardwired into us. It's built into our psyche. In the clinical setting, it's not just dangerous, but it's actually destructive to the well-being of the patient, because it interferes with our capacity to empathize with the patient, to truly understand what it's like to live in their skin and to experience the fullness of their being. If we view people as objects, right, it's quite easy for us to admire them. It's quite easy for us to envy them. It's quite easy for us to disdain, and we'll talk about how the splitting that occurs around celebrities, right? We simultaneously idolize them, and then we can simultaneously disdain them. Boom, in a heartbeat. Because perhaps they gain a few pounds, or because they don't act like we expect them to like. They don't act consistent with our projection of who we expect them to be in the world. We can even pity them. But we lack the capacity to experience the fullness of their being, which is what we as clinicians need to do. We need to attach to the fullness of the patient's experience. This requires them to trust us, right? It's profoundly impactful by the Therapeutic Alliance. But this population doesn't trust. Why should they, right? Why should they trust? The three key features that define this population: isolation, extraordinarily isolated; suspiciousness of outsiders. You're not a part of my tribe, I don't trust you. And the notion of hyperagency. They can control the world in a heartbeat. They experience discomfort, I'm out of here, I'm gone. Don't you dare challenge me. If something happens, I have a team of people who actually keep any sort of discomfort away from me. My life is oriented so that I avoid discomfort. And now you, clinician, are asking me to come into a room and tell you my deepest, darkest secrets? Are you kidding me? Right? So that's an extraordinary hurdle. That's an incredible obstacle that we as clinicians need to get to. And let me tell you something, their antenna is going crazy wild. Are you objectifying me? Are you safe? Can I trust you? So it isn't about saying, I mean, the worst, the worst possible clinical intervention, not the worst possible, but the worst, a bad clinical intervention is if you're trying to have a patient trust you, and you tell the patient, oh, you can trust me. I've heard it all before. It's like, no, that's not appropriate intervention. The intervention is being in your being. It's just like being in your being and recognizing that you're human and that you're going to have reactions to these patients. It's what do you do with those reactions? Denying that they exist is culturally destructive. Pretending that special needs don't matter, destructive. Recognizing that I'm a human and that I have reactions and that I live in a world that celebrates celebrity, that's clinically significant, and that's where the real work can begin to happen. So again, working in the stance of the humanistic stance, meeting the client where he or she is, and being clean and clear with our being. Not pretending that we're above this. Another red flag for me is I have a practice in New York and I sometimes need a psychiatrist, and so I'll call up an interview before when I was setting up my practice, and I'd bring up a psychiatrist and I would say, interview him or her about the case, and then I would say somewhere in the middle, oh, this patient is a celebrity, and the clinician would say what? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I don't care what it is. I'm not impacted by this stuff. What? Click. You did not get the referral, because guess what? You will know who this patient is when they come into your office, and you will have a reaction. I live in downtown Manhattan. Christy Turlington also happens to live in downtown. Somebody know who Christy Turlington is? I think she's a goddess. And so I would see Christy Turlington coming out of her building and hailing a cab, or going down into the subway, which made me love her a little more that she took the subway. And I would have an extraordinary emotional reaction to it. I would basically be like, oh my God, there's Christy Turlington. My whole limbic system would react. Now, this is my work. I've been doing this stuff for about 20 years now, but I had this extraordinary limbic system reaction that shut down my prefrontal cortex. So I could not engage in any sort of intellectual or rational conversation. And Christy Turlington would come up and ask me for directions, which she never did. But oh well. Hope springs eternal, perhaps one day. But I need to recognize that I'm going to have that, and I need to have a good place to put that. I was traveling. I travel a lot, and I had a referral for a patient who was having marital problems, and they wanted to see me in New York, and we were doing sort of the whole cell phone, call and miss, and I was in an airport, and I kept on walking by a newsstand, and on the cover of one of the design magazines, this patient and their spouse was on the cover. Right, bizarre. Right now, here I am. I'm trying to talk, and here's this. They look so happy, and they have this beautiful home, and yet I know that I'm trying to talk to this patient about seeking marriage, and that their marriage is in trouble. So we finally connect, and I'm talking to him on my mobile, and we're blithering along, and I said to him, I have to say this to you, and I didn't know that how this intervention would work. I said, I have to be honest with you, I'm in X, Y, and Z airport, and I keep seeing your picture on the cover of a magazine. Silence. And I thought to myself, oh God, I just blew that case up. The patient took a breath and said, wow. Nobody would have ever said that. Nobody ever acknowledges that. And the fact that you said that, and I said something like, and I think that must be extraordinarily difficult, because here you are dealing with this internal struggle, while outside you have this veneer of perfection. And he was like, wow, nobody was ever forthright and that honest about it. Because I was having a reaction. And so that reaction, if I would have suppressed and denied that reaction, the patient would have felt it. And I don't think we ever would have been able to begin our work together. So it's really recognizing that we're having these reactions. And not that we're sort of a bad person for having these reactions. We're human. We're human, and we have reactions on all levels of our being, right? Stimulus, response, reaction. We also need to remember that these reactions, just who here believes in the power of the unconscious? Right? Extraordinarily powerful. So these things just don't occur to us on the conscious levels of our being, but there's a profoundly forceful, unconscious movement going on here. These things also affect our motivation cycle. So if we suffer from narcissism, how many of these people know clinicians who brag about the patients who they treat, right? Or treatment centers who actually advertise about the patient population that they treat. Or if we are motivated by financial insecurity, if we have to answer to shareholders, if we have to answer to venture capital people who have invested in us, if we have to justify our bottom line, our motivations, chances are, not going to be terribly clear. So we need to make sure that we are hyper diligent and hyper aware with these issues, particularly with this population, because it is a hyper vulnerable population. And we've seen the carnage, right? I mean, from Judy Garland to Amy Winehouse to Philip Seymour Hoffman. You think that these people have all the resources, right? This is a projection. You think that these people, right? It's this notion of objectifying. See, even I language it that way. These people have all of the resources in the world, and yet why couldn't they get the help that they need? Well, because there wasn't anybody who they could attach to. Because there wasn't anybody who they could trust, who was worthy of their trust. And they suffered from an extraordinary, damaging, deadly disease. So we, as clinicians, need to avoid pitfalls in working with this particular population. And specifically, because we believe so strongly in the power of the unconscious, you here guys know, right, transference and countertransference? So transference is the reaction that the patient has towards me, both on the conscious and the unconscious level. Countertransference is the reaction that I have towards the patient, both on the conscious and the unconscious level. And I'm going to give you two examples. One's kind of easy, the other one's a little trickier. Jan got it right, though, over the weekend, so the second one. So I was seeing a patient, and America has this thing called the Oscars. You probably know them. It's sort of akin to the Pope being anointed in the Vatican or something. It's a huge deal. And so I was seeing a patient, and she was going to the Oscars, and she had a table at this event. And I'd been working with her for like 5 years, and we were winding down treatment. And she said to me, "Oh, Dr. Paul," she said, you know, I have a table it was the after party. It was Vanity Fair after party. And she said to me, "Dr. Paul, you know, boy, wouldn't it be great if you could come to this after party?" So what was her transference towards me? Friend, exactly. But more than friend, fan. I was a fan. She projected me as a fan, right? Because perhaps she doesn't know from friends. Perhaps a lot of her friends are fans. And so she thought that I would cherish this opportunity to attend the Vanity Fair party. What was my countertransference? Fan. I really want to go to this Oscar party. I've wanted to go to the Vanity Fair Oscar party since I stood around this high. So I was there. I was there. And then I wasn't, because I realized limbic system, prefrontal cortex, shut down, right? I was just like, I even had my outfit picked out for my shows. So I had to sort of recognize what was happening in that exchange, right? We were both reducing each other to objects. And so I needed to navigate that in a very, very significant way. And I couldn't go, as much as I wanted to go to the Oscars, to the Vanity Fair party, I couldn't go. Because again, the boundaries, because I'm not a friend, because I'm not a fan, because I'm her clinician. And my job is to give her a reparative experience. And how do I do that? By changing the way that she relates, by changing her relational patterns. And if I fall right back into that role, then guess what? I'm just perpetuating these destructive cycles. And I'm not seeing her as a human being. Another one that's a bit trickier. So I had a patient. I've been treated him for a while, probably 7 years. He was a famous artist. His paintings now sell for probably £750,000 a piece. We were finishing treatment and wrapping up treatment, and he came into session and he presented me with what? Painting. I did this for you. It's tricky, isn't it? Right? What are the issues? What's that? I happen to be, again, my countertransference was, I'm a huge fan and I'd love to have a piece of work as part of my collection. Yes, it was quite nice.
It's also a transactional object.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's interesting from that perspective.
Right. I'm making this for you. Complicated, right? Because what complicates it?
Value.
That's quite clear.
You have done something for her and see you do something for her.
I would have been like, why an apple? Beside the apple would have been a different story. Oh, yeah. Right.
His ability to handle the rejection and give it back to you.
Bingo. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because part of this process was him bringing himself to me, right? Him saying, I am grateful for your work. So I needed to be careful, right? Because if I said, oh no, I can't, if I said, oh no, I can't take this here, right? Huge narcissistic injury that he would have sustained. He happened to be a narcissist, surprise. But that would have been a huge narcissistic injury. So I needed to negotiate it very carefully. So I desperately wanted the painting. But I couldn't take the painting. And I had to explain it to him as follows, that I'm very appreciative of the fact that you're grateful for the work. The reason why you've made progress is because of you. I basically provide this container, this frame to hold you in. Part of that container and frame is the fact that we've negotiated an exchange of value for this relationship. You pay me every month. So this notion of a bonus is not professionally appropriate, and it's not personally appropriate, and I think it would tarnish our relationship. What you could do for me that I would appreciate if you felt the need to do something is write me a letter. It's outside of his, right? It's outside of what the true value of is his work. Get a little note card, send me a little note card. That's something that you could do because again, I need to be diligent in seeing him as an object and just snatching that painting away from him, right? And again, tweaking that the relational aspect of our work so that I can move him in a reparative direction, increasing, and a lot of the work was sort of bringing our awareness around what was happening in the relationship, the dynamic, right? And what's key with this particular population is because they have this extraordinary sense of hyperagency that they could leave instantly, that if my rejection of his gift had occurred probably early into treatment, I may have lost him, right? Because his would have been such a narcissistic injury to him that he would not be able to sustain the relationship. You know, how am I from time? 45 minutes in to go. Well, okay, good.
What would you have done if this person had been a completely unknown artist who did art as a hobby and they did a drawing of you and brought it into the office as a thank you?
Well, it was sort of easy until you got to the drawing of me bit. Like, can I just sort of like move away from that? Had they brought me a landscape, then I would have taken it. I mean, and I've done that before, actually. I mean, I have patients who have drawn me things and written poems, and I have a bipolar patient who does that. He's a poet, and he actually does that quite a lot. And so we need to avoid the appearance of viewing our patients as narcissistic supply. So what is narcissistic supply? You guys familiar with this term? Narcissistic supply are typically like relationships, objects, even external presentations that feed a person's narcissism. So this is where you get into the situation where a patient who talks about the patients that they treat, or says to you, I had a clinician who I was visiting in New York who said, oh, I'm sure you saw X, Y, and Z just sitting in the lobby, but I hope you're not going to say anything to anybody. Okay? There again, it's feeding their narcissism, it's feeding their narcissistic supply. And listen, this population is extraordinarily seductive. Extraordinarily seductive. They're incredibly manipulating, they're incredibly seductive. Every ounce of our being sometimes gets pulled dramatically into falling into those patterns of admiration, of worshiping them. And we need to avoid doing that by holding the frame. But it's not pretending that we're not going to do it. It's sort of giving ourselves permission to do it, and then taking the steps back that we need to take. And that happens through proper supervision. Supervision is extraordinary. And then the consciousness around that these things are going to happen. So we need to avoid, again, having people, our patients, used as status symbols for our work. So the other concept that I want to talk about is the notion of projection. And I think that most of us are familiar with the concept of projection from a psychodynamic standpoint, where we cut off uncomfortable bits of ourselves and put them onto somebody else. This projection comes out of psychoanalytic theory. So Jung, is anyone familiar with Marie-Louise von Franz? Extraordinary thinker. And so she developed the construct of, really, she looked at celebrity from an as the celebrity of the archetype. And basically, she said that where our known reality stops, where I'm like a middle-aged, kind of 5'9", sort of average male, that's where my reality stops. I can jump into Tom Cruise. That's basically where the projection is, right? And so I can put my fantasies on Tom Cruise, and I can identify in certain aspects of Tom Cruise. And this notion of archetype, this notion of celebrity as an archetype, is critically important. Because celebrity is an archetype, right? It's a construct, it's a frame, and then we project different bits into it. So, that's right. So we can inject bits into there. So we have wealth as part of the archetype. We have X, Y, we have all of these things that are part of the overriding archetype. And this is the wheel of archetypes. This is the wheel of Jungian archetypes. So you have the lover, you have the innocent, you have the sage, you have the hero, you have the outlaw. You have the magician, you have the caregiver, you have the ruler, you have the every person. And when we think about celebrities, right, they fall quite neatly into all of these categories. So we have the Jester. People know? American, Ellen DeGeneres. We have the innocents. Right. We have the lover. That's the young and fetching Richard Gere. That's because it's an archetype. So a number of different characters could fit into that. A young and fetching Penelope Cruz. A middle-aged and fetching George Clooney. Always. Then, of course, we have the ruler. And this is one of the few ways that women actresses can mature into a state of dignity. Right? And there aren't many of them. We have the actual ruler, we have the nobility again. Then we have the sage. People know who that is? It's Barbara Walters. She was an American journalist. She really broke the glass ceiling for women in journalism. Extraordinary human being. Then we have the sage. We're sad that it's over, right? Sad. But it ended really well. I have to say, I love a really great ending. Everything that could possibly happen, I want to happen, happened. The Outlaw, do you folks know who that is? Bernie Madoff, right? James Dean. And then you have lots of these. We have lots of these. This is an archetype that's filled by a number of different characters. Angelina Jolie filled it for a while when she was doing the Raiders of the Lost Ark thing. Who's a woman celebrity archetype? Hero. That's right. She just came up right. Meryl Streep. Yeah. Joan Arc. Absolutely. He's rather new on the scene, but quite strong. He's English, right? Yeah. But what happens when these people fail to meet our projections? What happens when they dare to step out of the roles that we assigned them? They get really angry. We get really angry. We can get really nasty, too, by the way. Because we engage in the process of splitting. You're supposed to be young and beautiful. How dare you age? Right? How dare you go through menopause? How dare you put on weight? How dare you allow yourself to decline? We know this from Peter's friend, right? Again, how dare you not be young and charming again? How dare you suffer from a substance abuse disorder? And how dare you look like that? Do we know this one? How dare you suffer from insecurities and sort of alter your facial features, just like every other wealthy middle-aged American woman does, right? We're furious at you because you don't look the way that you used to look. And then, of course, one of the biggest tragedies of all, Whitney Houston. How dare you suffer from a substance abuse disorder? And not only do we get angry at them, we think it's okay to make fun of them. We think it's actually okay to go on television and make jokes about them, right? Lindsay Lohan this, Justin Bieber that. There's also the notion of schadenfreude. People are familiar with what schadenfreude is? Schadenfreude is taking joy in the misfortune of other people, and studies show, and I have a study cited here, that it's much stronger when the people are people who we envy. And we envy celebrities, right? So when something misfortune, when they appear looking unhealthy, we don't have compassion for them. Somebody snaps a picture and sells it to a magazine, and then it's on the tabloids everywhere, right? And we're expecting these people to come into our office and sit and talk to us and tell us their most painful truth? Wow. That's quite a responsibility. That's quite an extraordinary burden. And that's quite an extraordinary task. This is a slide that sort of examples the notion of schadenfreude. This is the study that I came across that said that it's heightened in terms of people who are envied, that we derive an enormous sense of pleasure from their misfortune. And we make fun of them, right? Is Prince Charles gay, right? Is John Travolta gay? As if there's something bad about being gay. I don't get it, but again, this sort of taking pleasure of the fact that this person could be a weakness. And with John Travolta, it's sort of him stepping out of his Saturday Night Fever role, right? Where he was this young, virile, romantic lead, and now maybe he's gay. Well, our psyche can't handle that, so we need to attack him for that. Now, I don't know whether it's true or not, but let's assume that it is true. Do you think John Travolta is going to go into therapy and say, oh, gee, Dr. Hokemeyer, I kind of really want to process my homosexuality, right? That's going to remain such a hidden part of his identity and cause such extraordinary destruction. Again, Lindsay Lohan, the whole sort of Ellen DeGeneres bit. Poor Jennifer Aniston, right? She can't get a break. She's always lonely and rich. She's always rich, but she's always alone. And then this, business ability. So a woman gets pregnant and she puts on a few pounds and she's decimated, right? And not just decimated, but she's actually sold. Her image is actually sold, this is $1 billion industry, a huge industry that's built around this. So what is the solution? What is the solution for us who are practicing with this particular patient population? Well, the most important thing is to be diligent in our work. Do you guys ever get sick of this whole keep calm and all that? I mean, I'm like way over it. But it was the only slide that sort of made sense that had diligent in it. So I was like, enough already with the keep calm. I want to be angry about something. But be diligent about the work. And remember that we're dealing with a culturally distinct group of people who deserve culturally competent care. And what are those cultural features? Isolation, suspiciousness of outsiders, hyperagency. So that we can really begin to appreciate and work with the fullness of the patient's experience, so that we can honor the humanness then and stop reducing them to an object. So that's all that I have, and thank you. Thank
you very much, Dr. Hokemeyer, for this interesting, insightful presentation. Actually, when I first saw the initial draft of the presentation, I thought, we have 90 minutes, you have 150 slides, how is this going to work? And then I realized that actually to keep people engaged over an extensive period of time, it makes sense just to flip through not just visual representation of what you're actually talking about. I will just wrap up this presentation with a few key takeaway points from the presentation and also a few thoughts from my side on the topic. I think Dr. Paul has very tangibly explained celebrity as a dynamic construct that evolves over time and reflects a dominant mode of expression and cultural zeitgeist. And what I find particularly interesting is the notion of democratization, as we call it, of a celebrity, with first TV bringing celebrities into a living room, then reality TV basically giving anybody, even technically our neighbors, the chance to be on screen, to become a celebrity. And then with the whole more recent phenomenon of social media, and particularly Instagram these days, creates a whole new crowd of celebrities that is essentially defined just by the number of followers that they have on that platform. I think that as another takeaway point, the definition from Dr. Paul of celebrity as a human being that is being reduced to an object by the virtue of an externally observable feature, I think is a very spot-on observation, a very spot-on description of actually very complex phenomenon. And I think that's very much at the core of Dr. Paul's and also our philosophy at Paracelsus Recovery, and that all human beings, regardless of their place on the socioeconomic spectrum, they do deserve culturally competent and clinically excellent care. And that care needs to reflect the fullness of their humanness and to avoid exactly what celebrity does, avoid to reduce them to an object. And essentially that means that celebrities, like any other human being, they deserve empathy, they deserve understanding of their situation, and they deserve unprejudiced support. Then the construct of celebrity and the concept of projection, of transference and countertransference, I believe, are very important to understand for clinicians to be able to provide culturally competent and well-reflected and unprejudiced care for a patient. And I think Dr. Paul is doing an excellent job in his work to break down the construct of celebrity and the reaction of people to celebrities, and that includes seasoned therapists, and to demonstrate the implications this can have on a therapeutic alliance. It is too easy to relativate somebody's emotional pain when looking at their immense material wealth or their self-chosen lifestyle with all the problems that it entails, or because this can be a population that is particularly difficult to work with, and working with them can be very frustrating at times. And particularly the concept of countertransference So the emotional reaction of a therapist when working with a patient, and the conscious and unconscious part of that reaction to a patient, I think is very, very important in any clinical setting. This can be transferred from working with celebrities, but also to any clinical, any therapeutic dynamic. And those of you who work as therapists have undoubtedly in your careers encountered situations where you were aware of an emotional reaction when you were working with a patient. And that is normal. We are human beings. In a way, emotions is what defines us as such. We have value systems, we have an emotional frame of reference that guides our emotional responses, that guide our compassion. And that is fine, but we have to be very much aware of that. So when we work with patients who have a certain personality that appeals to us, or in contrast triggers negative emotions, when a patient reminds us of someone we don't like or we don't like, or physical attractiveness of a patient can rouse emotions in a therapist. A patient's individual story can resonate with a therapist and can trigger their own memories. So I think it's what Dr. Paul was explaining. It's very much important to be aware of your projections, of your emotional reaction, and to be honest with yourself about them. And also trying to identify, make sense of the unconscious part of this emotional reaction. And that is very much the basis of the ability of being able to provide Dr. Paul calls culturally competent care. And this doesn't just apply to celebrities, this applies to working with anyone. But celebrities can be a particularly activating population. Their lifestyle, sometimes their immense material wealth, or the mere persona that we perceive in a celebrity, these things, they will always impact a therapist. So if any therapist tells me that when they're having breakfast with a patient, and this patient just ordered a private jet over the phone before ordering their morning coffee, kind of in the same voice. This is actually something that happens. It's a bit an extreme example. But if anybody tells me they don't have an emotional reaction of some sort to that, I would very much struggle to believe them. And that's why in a clinical setting, proper supervision is very, very, very important. At Paracelsus Recovery, now we work with ultra high net worth and celebrity clients mainly. Everybody is supervised. The psychiatrists, the doctors, the therapists, but also everybody else who has any kind of interaction with the patients. That includes the hospitality team, the drivers, the maids, the chefs, and so on. And I think in a clinical setting, selecting appropriate staff and putting a proper supervision structure in place is the responsibility of the organization. But when you work with celebrity clients, or any other activated clients for that matter, when you work with them individually on an outpatient basis, it is your professional duty to reflect on your own emotions, on your emotional response, conscious and subconscious, on your projections, and also to seek proper supervision yourselves. With that, I would like to thank everyone, and if there are any questions, we open the floor for
Yeah, do you guys
Q&A.
have any we can break for later, which will be the worst thing that happened ever. But if we have thoughts or comments, I have to write a whole book on this, so I'd love to get some material. This is about all that I have right now. I need 60,000 words. Doctor, yes.
We talked before, and we deal with a similar population, and what I've noticed is that one thing that kind of strikes a chord in working with this population is one of community. Stressing what is your community, who is your community, here's my community, this is how I support myself in my own cases. Because we know that celebrities don't come out of an egg, they don't hatch. They have a base behind them of support that brought them. You know, they're the demonstration of mechanism. what do you think of that in terms of just bringing up, you know, questions around their own community? What is their own support system?
Well, yeah, it's the systemic nature of the disease. We have to look at the system that the patient comes from. So whether that's family of origin, whether that's family of choice, we need to identify what that system is. And I feel that we're doing a disservice to our patients if we don't do systemic treatment. So some of the treatment centers that I've set up, family and paracelsus is the same. Family treatment is required. If you don't do family treatment, you're not coming in to residence. And this is not psychoeducation, because that can sometimes just further pathologize the patient. But it's family, it's systems work. So I don't care who they are. I mean, we've had business managers. Some of these people are so isolated that their best friend is their housekeeper. So let's bring the housekeeper into treatment. So that's where we need to. That's an excellent point, that it needs to be a systemic lens. We just can't take the person. I mean, what is the nature of residential treatment, right? We have somebody who's existing in this frame and they're killing themselves. So we take them out of that frame and we put them in this frame. Then what do we do in this frame, right? We need to tweak them. We also need to start tweaking this frame back here. Because if we don't, then the patient's just going to go back to the same destructive patterns that they can.
But if I may add onto that, it's because the way we think of Paracelsus is also, there is on paper, there's an ideal approach, and then there's also reality. And I'll give you one specific example, is we very closely work with some of the royal families from the Middle East. And we had a young patient who came to us, and we started working with him and realizing, I mean, maybe that's a no-brainer, but it's the family system, it's a family, it's the whole deconstructive cycle, the parents being in charge of the money, controlling every aspect of your life. And so we need to involve the family. We need the family to come here, or we go there if that's what they would like, and work with them. Then we had a window of opportunity to work with the family. The parents actually came to Zurich. They listened, we did psychoeducation, we engaged them in family therapy. And we thought, okay, the reaction is positive. And they take away something from that. They went back home, and about half a year later, the client's back with us, fully relapsed, and we go through the whole cycle of treatment again. And then at some point, the awareness arose that this is such an entrenched family system. This includes, and this is not family in a Western sense, these are thousands of family members. And the close circle of family maybe includes 50 or 100 individuals. And the power dynamics are very, very complex. They're so entrenched. And then we thought, okay, what's our job? Our job is to help this poor young man to survive, first of all survive, and second of all, to give him all the limiting circumstances, including his family and where he's come from, to achieve as best a possible outcome as possible, to get back some hope, to get back some happiness. And for us, to teach him positive coping mechanisms, to help him, to support him, to function in that dysfunctional environment. So, long story, but what I want to say is you always have to be pragmatic about, as well about the actual possibilities and the resources work of a client's background.
And you can do family system work with just one person too. So, did you have somebody over here? Yes, sir.
I'm happy that you mentioned persons related to celebrities and their royal families. Our clinic is working mainly with the royal families. What are the things that you see different between the royal families and the celebrities?
I would say, I mean, based on the construct of celebrity, is you can be celebrity for.
You can be a celebrity for having a certain last name and being part of a certain royal family. So celebrity is a broader construct, and below that, I mean, there's obviously different dynamics, different ways somebody can become a celebrity. But when you think about a clinical setting or a treatment, I think you cannot talk about the difference between royal families or other celebrities. It's more you have to take into account that every human being is different. And even two royal family members from different royal families might have their own very, very different issues. If you talk about royal family and mental health, I mean, the British royal family has done an amazing job over the last weeks and months to talk openly about the implications of traumatic events in their own lives. So these are royals. They had a traumatic experience. They deal with it in individual ways. Some of them could have resorted to substance abuse. Might have, we don't know. And that doesn't make them any different from any other human being. In the end, it comes down to be vulnerable, and something can happen to us. We need to deal with this pain somehow, self-medicate. Celebrities just makes it more difficult. Being a celebrity makes it more difficult because, as Dr. Paul rightly said, one of the main features of celebrity is the isolation. I don't know whom to trust. I cannot reach out to help. And there's one more aspect, I think, that is in celebrity, especially when it is connected with material wealth, makes it in a way more difficult to access appropriate help or to reach out for help, because there's no classic rock bottom as we know it. We all know this term. Because throwing money at the problem and having your lawyers and your PR people sorting out things for you, that can really very much prolong the problem and kind of cover up for it. And it gets much more complex than that. It's a lot of people in power and wealth. They have dependent people, family members, employees, shareholders, who benefit from them. And then there's also this dynamic of manipulation. Sometimes it's not in everybody's best interest if somebody gets help and gets better, because you benefit financially from that person being in that position. Or you can just deflect your own problems onto that person, and so on and so on. So I think that the construct of celebrity and mental health is extremely complex, and it's our job, and I think that's where Dr. Paul is doing a great job, is trying to make sense of that and bring clinically tangible advice for people who work with celebrity clients.
And I also think too, it's a melange, isn't it? So it isn't just celebrity, but it's actual. It isn't just royalty, but if they're an Arab family, right? They have different notions of time. And so showing up on time, coming into treatment on time, and we're asking them to have boundaries around their use about certain things. So I think that's just the place of analysis. It creates this way that we can formulate a case. And then once we formulate the case, then we deal with the melange of issues that are presented in that case. The cultural background, the family systems work, all sorts of things. That's just one level of analysis. Anyone else?
I have one question for you, Dr. Paul, and it's around, you just touched on working with royal families in Saudi Arabia or wherever in that part of the world. And in terms of the cultural, the way of operating, the way of expressing gratitude, what are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about that?
We just talked about a case this weekend. Yes, please.
I have to tell you, this might be a trick question, because Sean has been working with one of her clients for many months in the Middle East. So she has been confronted with specifically that problematic.
Well, again, it depends upon what the gift represents and how it's presented. And so, again, you have to be sensitive. You have to meet the patient where they are and what their perspective is. I can't impose my Western ideals and my Western definitions on this, because to do so would interfere, would dishonor her. It would actually in many ways shame her, which we do not want to do. Sure. Was that a plan?
Actually, no. I'm happy that one the other.
Good. Well, if you did a thorough analysis, you may take the gift, depending on what it is. I mean, if it's a $250,000 Rolls Royce, then probably not. But if it's something smaller and sort of a token, if it's a token of appreciation in the context of their world, then you would take the gift. But the analysis is, how does it fit in? What's the perception of their world, right? If they're worth $1 billion and they operate in this world, and they want to write me a check for £1,000, that could be seen as a token of appreciation.
So are you saying you would accept that?
If the culture comes from, if it's a culture of gifts, and if not accepting the gift would be an insult to them, to the culture, which it is in their communities.
Is that any different from not accepting the painting, you know?
Yeah, because it was an American who wanted to give me a painting, and the painting was worth an extraordinary amount of money. Because it's again looking at the frame through the frame of, the lens has to start with the culture. With the culture from where they're coming from. This is an Arab culture, this is an American culture. It's two different frames. And then you engage in an analysis. It's not a 1, 2, 3 analysis. It's again a melange, it's a bouquet. You have to have different levels of analysis and you have to consider all different variables. It's the dynamic process. We can't split, right? This is good and this is bad. We have to sort of put it in the context of where it is. Sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Go please.
I just wanted to report in from the other side. I used to have a job in the public eye in entertainment and TV, and I have just retrained to be a therapist. And I have never experienced such prejudice in any area of life than I have from fellow therapists, fellow students, supervisors, everybody. They assume me to be like the person I was on TV, and it's really difficult because I have to play small to get them to, because they think I'm going to walk in going, right, I'm going to get millions of exciting clients who want to have me as their therapist. Right. Similarly, in the same way, I have clients who go, oh, are you my therapist? Oh my God, and I've had to develop a technique that works separately for each one. Some people think, I said to one woman, is that a problem? She went, no, it's brilliant. So I said, well, let's just do a session and then we'll see how you feel at the end of the session, and gave her the week to tell all her friends. And then the next week she was a bit calmer and so on. But it is an issue from both sides. I don't know if that's helpful to you, but it's honestly, supervisors and everybody going, God, why are you doing this? Oh my God, extraordinary, quite extraordinary. Yeah.
Thank you. Eduardo, did you have a question?
Thank you. Hi, Harold.
Hey, Harold.
So, one issue I'd like you to address, if you could, is what Jan just mentioned around the family and the family dynamics. And quite often you see that the people around the person, although they're not always the family, you find all these leeches, I call them, around them. And they are really not very interested. They want the person to live and they want to help the person. However, when they see what it means for the recovery of that person, they have all made their nests around that dysfunctional life.
Right.
Even there, I had clients that when I start telling their agents or their PAs and the people helping them, start telling them what it means. The simple fact that this person will have to sleep at the same time every day, eat at the same time every day, go, get a healthy lifestyle. You could see the horror in their faces because they're like, whoa, when this all changed, that means my life will change as well.
Right.
I'll have to get up early. Right? So I'd like you to address a little bit on that. And on top of that, I'll put an example there that happens to us. I had a client that we managed to put this client on a healthy lifestyle, on a healthy path, and the family rejected family therapy. I'd like to know how do you overcome that in a way. And then, although they were the ones bringing the client to us in the beginning, motivating the clients, and they were helpful in the beginning, afterwards, they call me in despair, and I was like, oh, he's horrible now. He's doing this, and he's firing that person, and so on. So I call the client up, and they find out he's going to his meeting, he's seeing his therapist, he's going to the gym, he's limping on time. They're like, no, he's doing fine. That's the real guy. right? You've been living with someone else with the disease for the last 20 years. That's the real guy. That's the man you married. And then of course the whole support system was not there for quite some time. A year and a half later, the client is back with us, right? And then we try again and finally to get this family. So if there is a trick, or if there is a way that you address, that you manage to get all these people that are around and enabling to get into treatment, I'd like to your opinion on that. How do you do that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, basically stay calm and be diligent. It's a process, isn't it? I mean, there aren't, it isn't like we're removing a cancer cell, and so we have to remember that we're dealing in a systemic frame, and that there's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And so giving that patient the support that they need to make the decisions that they recognize, and remembering, we like to think that, I can go away for 30 days and I'll be cured. This is a lifetime recovery process, and what we're doing is we're changing deeply entrenched systemic forces, we're changing deeply entrenched personality disorders, and we're addressing deeply entrenched mental health issues. And so these are going to take some time to tweak. And so again, the strength comes in the solution is really in the strength of the Therapeutic Alliance. Because we hate to talk about relapse as this profession, but relapse is part of the reality. The question is, what happens when you relapse? Do you point to the treatment center or the clinician that you came from and said, they don't know what the hell they're talking about, it didn't work? Or do you get on your mobile and you call them and I'm in trouble, I want to come back? That's what you want. You want to maintain the integrity of that therapeutic relationship that you have with that patient, and be diligent and stay calm to do that. So, and we have one more question, and then I think I'm going to let you guys go. Sir?
Regarding dealing with the family, we are thinking of the family as a group, really, which is extremely important. But in Arabic families, one of the important things that our team do is to identify few things. Who is the decision making in the family? And then one start to communicate with that person and spend time with that decision. The second thing, if I feel that the group with the person, with the prince or the sheikh, are not helping, many times I put them on a plane and send them back home and create my own team here in London. Thank you.
It's great. I mean, from a system standpoint, that's called joinder. Join with the system, and then once you're in the system, you figure out the place of attachment to the system, and then once you join the system, then you begin to tweak it. So if any of you guys have comments after, feel free to ask us, and you've been great. Thanks.